Good morning, everybody. For those of you who haven't met me before, and there may be some, my name's Nick Frank. I manage the local skills improvement plan here at the Chamber. We are going to have, obviously, our two speakers this morning. I'm going to give it a minute or two for there are still people coming through the waiting room, so we'll try and get all of those through. Um, we're going to have Mike will deliver the QLM elements, and then we will have Andrea, who will give us the her piece, and then we'll have plenty of time at the end for Q&A. So if you've got any questions as things go along, just make a quick jot in your margin, and we'll give everybody a good chance to ask their questions and have their input at the end of the session. As always, if coming out of this there is anything skills related that you would like to follow up with or you want more information on, by all means, come through to me at the Chamber, and I will feed through to all our partners of anything that needs joint attention. I hope you enjoy this morning, and catch up with you all soon.
Is that the key for me to come in?
Yes. Oh, sorry, Mike. I didn't do enough of a fanfare. My apologies.
That's all
Over
right.
to you,
Okay,
sir.
so always the most nervous part is I'll try to share what's on my screen. If that's working. Does that look okay to everybody? Yeah.
We can see your presentation, not the presented slide. Sorry, can't get my words out.
You say is that everything okay?
We see the presentator mode, not the presentation mode, Mike.
Oh, okay. Right. Let me just stop this for a second. Let me have a look. Is this working or?
Nope.
Okay, sorry, just bear with me. I will try and get this up and running. Sorry, are you seeing anything on your screen?
Nothing, Mike. No.
Yep.
Does that come up?
Yeah, it just needs to go into slideshow mode.
Has that worked?
It has. It's showing a preview of the next slide, but I think we'll just go with it.
Okay. Yeah, if that's okay, then I should just move on. So, firstly, thanks everybody for joining the call. It's always great to check in every quarter. Just to give you a quick bit of background before we launch in. So, for those of you who haven't been on these seminars before, every quarter we produce a report, a sort of deep dive really into the labour market for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. And the idea is to build a kind of rolling evidence base for the monitoring of the local skills improvement plan, and to support its refresh in the months to come as well. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to build up a detailed picture as we can about the labour market, and we try and draw out the key messages in the seminar. So there is a lengthy report which will be put online by the Chamber. So there's a page on the Chamber website where you can download this and other books. And you can also download the full slide deck from this presentation as well. So we are limited in time. So although there's a lot of slides in the deck, we will only be touching on some of them, but you can go back and revisit them afterwards. So, yeah, what we're trying to do here is, in the work that we do, this complements not just the evidence needs for the LSIP, but also the local Get Britain Working Plan too. So the longer report that we have covers things like health-related barriers to labour participation and some of the metrics that are tracked for that strategy. And really, for anyone who's interested in labour market-related topics, hopefully we've got something for you in this presentation. So the key messages, I'm going to give you three kind of big headline messages from this quarter. So these are the things that have changed since the last report, or things that we think are really worthy of note. The first is Cambridgeshire and Peterborough's labour market is showing some encouraging signs of improvement. So if you look across the main metrics that describe the health of the labour market, so employment, labour market participation rates, the number of job postings, the median posting durations, all of those things are going in the right direction in terms of signalling the health of the labour market. So that's something that we'll go into in a bit more depth. But beneath those headline figures, we've got some new data that casts some light on spatial disparities in performance across the county, which shows some quite concerning disparities, and we'll go into depth in the presentation about those. So overall, it's a picture of improvement, but there is some new evidence about what lies underneath that. Secondly, we've now got even more evidence about the impact of AI and how it's reshaping the demand for digital skills in particular. So if you look over the last year of data, we can point to some trends in how AI is featuring in job advertisements. And we've got more evidence about the sentiment of employers about how they will use AI, and in particular, how it's reshaping demand for entry-level roles. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. And then finally, as I touched on just a minute ago, we now have some really hyper-local data on deprivation, which tells us more about the disparities in education and skills across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. So I'll spend a little bit of time talking about that in depth. So those are the headline things that we'll talk about. But what I'm going to do is just break these down into a sort of half dozen or so kind of areas that we touch on in the report. I'll give you some key messages, and then Hannah is going to do a little bit more of a deep dive into that by touching on some of the chart data that we have included in the report. So some highlights from that. So in terms of employment and labour market participation, as I said earlier, we've got some encouraging evidence that the labour market is strengthening. So overall, since the last report, which we published in August, overall conditions have improved quite markedly. The employment rate has risen, and the economic inactivity rate has fallen as well, quite significantly. And we've seen a sharp drop in sickness-related inactivity in particular. So the number of workless people wanting a job in Cambridge and Peterborough has hit a record low. So we're going to just touch on some of the data points that underpin that. But Hannah, you're going to talk us through the movement in the employment rate in particular.
Yeah, okay. So it's finally good to report some good news on the region's labour market. So this chart shows the employment rate in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough over the last 20 years. So you can see there was a big drop in employment between 2022 and 2024, which coincided with a higher rate of economic inactivity, particularly due to long-term sickness and being a student. But we've seen a strong recovery over the past year, with employment increasing to 79.2% in the year to June 2025, which was the highest rate for 6 years, so the highest rate since the COVID pandemic. And at the same time, we've seen a drop in inactivity, particularly due to long-term sickness, and also a drop in unemployment. So this chart shows the change in employment by occupation over the past year. So it suggests that the rise in employment has been led by transport operatives, and that's in line with job postings information that we've been looking at over the last year, which has shown a big spike in recruitment for transport workers, and large goods vehicle drivers have become one of the most in-demand occupations in the north of the region, so in Peterborough, Fenland and Huntingdonshire. And this was followed by science, research, engineering and technology professionals, which had previously led that decline in employment over recent years. And again, this has been in line with job postings information, which has shown record low recruitment for tech workers, but with demand picking up slightly over the past 6 months, along with strong recruitment activity for engineers. We've also seen an increase in employment over the past year for caring personal service occupations, and we'll be talking about care workers a bit later on, but employment dropped over 2022 to 2024, but has recovered over the past year, and the data we'll be covering later highlights retention difficulties in the sector, but a big spike, particularly in international recruitment lately, particularly from outside of the EU. Teaching and educational professionals, so employment increased over the past year after falling for the previous 2 years, and this fall had reflected an increase in teachers leaving the profession since the pandemic. But job postings data recently highlights a big increase in demand for workers to support young people with special educational needs, particularly SEND teaching professionals and teaching assistants. And in East and South Cambridgeshire, teaching assistants have recently become the most in-demand occupation when it comes to numbers of job vacancies, overtaking care workers. And for health and public service professionals, employment has increased consistently year on year and continued to increase in the last year. And at the other end of the scale, we've seen a big drop in employment for sales and administrative occupations over the last year, and that coincides with a fall in retail and hospitality employment. This could reflect general economic conditions impacting these sectors, but could also be in part due to technological advancements such as automation and AI, reducing the need for some workers. And again, we'll be discussing AI's impact on the job market a bit later on.
Thanks, Hannah. So taking you through to local jobs market. So following on from Hannah's points just there, we see that the hiring outlook has improved since the last report in August. So in the previous quarter, job postings were just beginning to grow. So we saw plus 3% in jobs postings growth over the first 6 months of the year. That growth has increased to plus 7% over the last 6 months. And of note, Cambridge, its job postings, which were declining in the earlier part of this year, has now edged up 1% in the latest 6 months. So overall recruitment activity has become a bit more broad-based across sectors and locations. But those three key messages, jobs postings, they are on the rise, but actually they're not rising as quickly as some other places. In England, we have seen within that some shift in occupational demand, and you saw from the previous slide there what that looks like. And we're seeing some big variations by district. So if I just move us on to the next slide, Hannah, you're going to talk us through some of the detail.
Yep, sure. So again, some tentatively good news on job postings. So this chart shows the number of job postings in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough in 6 monthly periods since 2012. So you can see that job postings fell during the pandemic and increased sharply over the following year and a half. They then followed a downward trend until early this year. And in the 6 months to October, job postings increased for the first time in 2.5 years. But nonetheless, they remained 9% below the long-term average and 2% below the pre-pandemic average. And this table shows the change in job postings at local level over the past 6 months and over the past year. So if we look at the final column in the table, we can see that all areas saw job postings increase in the last 6 months, but job growth was weak in Cambridge and Peterborough, so with a 1% and 2% increase. And of course, these are our biggest job markets in the region. And they also increased by just 3% in Fenland, and this was below the England increase of 9%. And if we look at growth in job postings compared to a year ago, so that's the penultimate column, Job postings were still down in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough by 10%, and in Cambridge and Peterborough themselves by 24% and 7%, compared to 6% growth across England. But job postings are up strongly in other areas, particularly in East and South Cambridgeshire. And this shows the change in job postings by occupation over the past 6 months. So there's been a big increase in job postings for science research, engineering and technology professionals, particularly engineers, with mechanical engineers becoming one of the most in-demand occupations in Cambridge and Peterborough, and for business and public service professionals and associate professionals, particularly project support officers, accountants and solicitors and lawyers. And at the other end of the scale, we've seen a big drop in job postings for health professionals and associate professionals. So we talked earlier about continued growth in employment in health occupations, but job postings data suggest that this growth may now be tailing off. And this is in line with a drop in job postings by the NHS over the last year. So the NHS is our biggest recruiter across the region and in all local authority areas, and also across England. But the NHS is now under pressure to cut costs, with 18,000 job losses recently being announced among admin and managerial positions. And local integrated care boards have also been instructed to reduce their running costs from October 2025. So we can expect this trend in reduced NHS job growth, or perhaps even a fall in jobs for the foreseeable future.
Thanks, Hannah. And one of the things that we wanted to just spend a minute or two on was some research that we've done specifically on jobs and recruitment in agri-tech, agri-food. So one of the key sectors of the local growth plan, and a long-standing focus of economic development within Cambridgeshire and Peterborough in previous plans going back to the local industrial strategy. So as part of the LSIP work, we've done a kind of deep dive into the sector. We did this about a month ago, 2 months ago, and we just wanted to pull some highlights into this presentation so you could get some sense of what we've been working on. And what we did essentially was build up a list of employers who recruit into this sector, and some of them are in companies like legal companies who hire sector specialists, as well as those that are more obviously facing into agri-tech and agri-food, and try to build up a picture of how many employers there are out there who are actively recruiting into this sector. And by this sector, we're defining it really as the full kind of range of activities involving food production and manufacturing. And we were able to identify over 300 employers that were kind of active in recruiting across this area, and build up a picture of their activity over the last year and over the last 5 years. As you can see some of the headline stats from that. And once we were able to do that, we were able to try and get a sense of which jobs were taking longest to fill, which jobs were being posted in biggest numbers, and try to understand the technical education requirements behind those roles and how those sit alongside the provision that we've got within this part of the world. And what we found was that when you look at that cohort of employers, transport and warehouse roles top the demand for labour, which is consistent with some of the earlier numbers that we showed you about the overall labour market. But some of the technical education and requirements for some of those roles are not available locally. So that's something that we need to look at. And also that this region is a cold spot for some qualifications and training relating to agricultural roles within agri-tech and agri-food. We've got manufacturing, it's thriving in local education, but some of the specific disciplines within food production are not as well provided for in terms of the qualifications that are out there and delivered locally. Even with technical education available locally, IT and engineering roles within that sector remain hard to fill. So that potentially suggests a need for more technical education enrolments and cross-sector talent in that industry, because of course agri-tech and agri-food employees are competing for certain skill sets within the broader economy, and facing stiff competition in some cases. And so we're seeing high-level technical roles remaining hard to fill within the sector, at the very highest skills levels, which potentially means the need for some more advanced training in the technical disciplines that are relevant here. So that's just some of the highlights. I'm going through it very quickly, and we can perhaps pick this up in the Q&A later. But moving on to skills gaps and shortages more generally. So again, some potentially positive things to report here. So since the last report in August 2025, we're seeing the trend of easing shortages has continued. The median vacancy durations have inched down further, which is a sign potentially that employers are not finding it as difficult to fill roles. And the proportion of vacancies that are hard to fill or limited by skills is also on a downward trajectory based on the most recent information that we have. However, some recruitment difficulties persist for occupations such as skilled trades, health and care, teaching, and childcare workers. So 3 key messages there. Recruitment difficulties are easing based on the information that we have. Some recruitment challenges still persist, and workforce skills gaps, at least according to the most recent information that we have, are also at a record low. So I'm going to put you through to Hannah for some more detailed data. Hannah, if you could take it from here.
Yep, so this chart shows median posting duration for job postings, and in simple terms, that's the average length of time that a job posting is active for. And a higher posting duration is an indicator of it taking longer to fill a position. So median posting duration increased sharply from late 2018 to late 2021 when there was more competition for workers during and following the pandemic. It then fell over the following 3 years, but increased slightly in the 6 months to April 2025, which could have been the result of employers being more cautious over hiring following employer tax rises in last year's budget and announcements around increased employment rights. But median posting duration has reduced again over the past 6 months to the lowest level for over 6 years, so suggesting we're moving back now towards pre-pandemic hiring conditions. Okay, and so we've got some information here on the region's adult social care workforce and recruitment difficulties here. So Skills for Care, the workforce development and planning body for adult social care in England, has recently sent over their latest data on the care workforce in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. And care workers have long been highlighted in our reports as an area of high demand, but with significant recruitment and retention issues. So care workers are one of the most in-demand occupations in the region when it comes to job vacancies, and demand is projected to grow more than any other occupation in the coming years. But these vacancies take longer than average to fill. So over the last 6 months, they took 20% longer than average to fill. And the Skills for Care data provides further evidence of these issues. So the latest State of the Adult Social Care Sector and Workforce report shows, for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, shows a high rate of adult social care vacancies. So 1 in 12 adult social care posts in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough were vacant in 2024-25. There was a very high rate of staff turnover at 30%. So after falling between 2021-22 and 23-24, staff turnover increased to 30.2% in 2024-25. And this was above the England average of just over 23% and equivalent to 6,400 leavers. We're seeing increased reliance on foreign workers, particularly from outside the EU. So the share of workers from outside the EU has increased sharply over the past 3 years, from 11% to 31%, while the share of EU workers has reduced slightly from 12 to 11%, and the share of British workers has reduced from 77% 3 years ago to just 58% over the latest year, and that's well below the national average of 71%. And an ageing workforce is likely to exacerbate those high staff turnover rates. So almost 1/4 of the workforce are nearing retirement age, so age 55 years and over. But demand for care workers is rising. So the Skills for Care data suggests that population ageing could necessitate a 28% increase in the adult social care workforce by 2040. But struggles to meet this demand could impact labour market participation. So the Office for Budget Responsibility has identified that population ageing and the struggle for the care sector to keep up with rising demand for workers could be a downside risk to future labour market participation, with more people potentially becoming inactive in the future due to caring for an adult, such as an elderly relative. And if we move on to, slide 31. So this shows the average length of time taken to fill a care worker vacancy than the regional average. So it's taken longer than average to fill a vacancy for care workers since 2018. In 6 months to October 2018, it took 78% longer than average to fill a care worker vacancy. And over the past 6 months, it's taken 20% longer than average. And this chart shows some different employment projections and the Skills for Care projections. So these were commissioned by the government a couple of years ago, but they highlight the same issue. So the chart shows employment requirements by occupational group in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough between 2020 and 2035. So the orange bar shows growth in the total number of jobs, and the red bar shows the replacement requirements. So the number of people needed to replace people that leave, for example, due to retirement. So when these are combined, the requirement for caring personal service occupations is higher than for any other occupational group, particularly when it comes to replacement demand. So 24,000 people will be required just to replace people that leave, which is higher than any other occupation, plus a further 9,000 people required to meet demand from employment growth due to an ageing population.
Thanks, Hannah. Moving on to education and training. So since the last report, sort of mixed picture, really. Academic outcomes, the data that reveals that, shows a minor uptick when you look at it from an overall Cambridgeshire and Peterborough perspective. But there are some significant disparities that lie underneath that. Higher education participation has fallen after reaching record highs for the previous 5 years. And as we'll see in a minute, new data on deprivation reveals some really deep educational skills and disparities across the region. Hannah, you're going to touch on the slide in a minute, but I mean, it's as stark as this, really. We have both the most deprived part of the country in our region when it comes to education and skills, and one of the least deprived, all in the same small area. So Hannah, you're going to take us through that with this map and this ranking.
Yeah, okay, so this slide provides information on education and skills deprivation. So the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government has recently released an update to the indices of deprivation, which is the first update for 6 years, so the first update we've had since the pandemic. Now, the IOD is a combination of various indicators showing how deprived an area is on various domains, such as income, housing and health deprivation, and also has a domain for education and skills deprivation. And you may have heard on the news about a month ago about a neighbourhood in Jaywick in Essex being the most deprived in England. So that's where this data came from. So the Education and Skills Deprivation Index is a combination of 6 indicators. So Key Stage 2 performance, that's test results at the end of primary school. Key Stage 4 performance, that's GCSE and equivalent results at the end of secondary school. Pupil absence rates, the percentage of pupils that are persistently absent. Higher education progression by age 21. And an adult skills indicator combining the proportion of adults with no or low qualifications and the proportion who can't speak English or can't speak English well. Now, there are almost 34,000 neighbourhoods in England, and the IOD ranks these from 1 to 34,000, with 1 being the most deprived area. So the map on the left shows ranks of education and skills deprivation in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough and surrounding areas. And the dark blue areas are the most education and skills deprived. So you can see that the highest levels of education and skills deprivation are in the north of the region, particularly around Fenland and Peterborough. But there's also some pockets of education and skills deprivation in Huntingdon and Cambridge. So areas in the 10% most deprived in England include 35 neighbourhoods in central Peterborough, 14 in Fenland, in Wisbech and March, 3 in Huntingdonshire, so in the Oxmoor area of Huntingdon, and 1 in Cambridge in an area of Fen Ditton. And if we look at the right-hand side of this slide, what the IOD also does is to take all neighbourhoods in a broader local authority area and provide an average rank of deprivation for all the neighbourhoods in that area. So when this is done, Fenland comes out as the most education and skills deprived local authority area in England. So every single one of its neighbourhoods is within the 50% most deprived in England. And Peterborough is also ranked as the 28th most education and skills deprived of 296 areas. But at the other end of the scale, we have South Cambridgeshire, which is ranked as 288 of 296 areas, so the 9th least education and skills deprived area of England, with Cambridge also ranking highly and East Cambridgeshire and Huntingdonshire being in the 50% least education and skill deprived of all local authority areas. So some big disparity within the region. And we've got a quick chart here on the percentage of 19-year-olds entering higher education. So we've had some new data for 2023-24. And across England, that's the turquoise line, the higher education participation fell for the first time since the earliest year of data. And this could be because higher education participation increased perhaps a bit more than it would have done following the pandemic, and it's now returning to trend levels. But when we look at Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, we've had these diverging trends. So in Cambridgeshire, higher education participation fell for the first time in 7 years, while higher education participation in Peterborough increased to a new record high and increased beyond Cambridgeshire levels for the first time. And that's particularly because Peterborough has a high rate of disadvantaged people entering higher education than across Cambridgeshire. So 28% of young people who had been entitled to free school meals at age 15 entered higher education at age 19 in Peterborough, which was just below the national average of 29%. But in Cambridgeshire, this figure was just less than 20%, so well below the national average.
Thanks, Hannah. So we're going to move on to digital skills and occupations. So since the last report, we've seen an increase in postings of jobs, of digital jobs. So we were reporting in the 6 months that we covered in the last report, job postings were up 5.8% on the previous 6 months. But at the latest data, the latest 6-month period shows they're up 12.9%. So that indicates some stronger hiring momentum behind digital jobs. But there's some interesting patterns there. So we've seen a real surge in AI-focused roles. Previously, we noted a 66% half-year increase in AI job ads. That's what we noted in the last report. And for the most recent 6-month period, we now see, for the most recent year-on-year period, we're seeing 133% year-on-year increase. So, I mean, if you take that kind of year-long perspective, it just underscores how fast AI adoption is translating into job demands and the way that the labour market operates. And although we do cover in the report how this is interacting with the demand for entry-level roles, and the evidence here is a bit mixed. So although internships and apprenticeship postings are still trending downward, this trend does predate the boom in AI adoption, and evidence of there being a causal link remains unclear. And we'll pick that up actually in a slide just in a minute, where we talk about the results from the most recent quarterly economic survey, which picks up the views of employers and how their recruitment intentions have been affected by AI. But really kind of 3 key messages to take away. Firstly, that digital job postings are ticking upwards, and we're seeing some good momentum there. But demand for digital skills is shifting towards AI and basic digital literacy. So if you look at the skills that are most commonly requested within job ads, we see really strong demand for AI skills, but also a continued strong demand for basic digital literacy and those kind of more foundational type skills for operating computers and so on. But those kind of skills, if you like, that are kind of in the middle, those kind of technical skills that relate to software development and programming, those are much less prominent now within the skills demands that we're seeing in job ads than they used to be. So that we're seeing that kind of shift happening within the labour market. And as we'll see in a slide in a minute, with entry-level jobs, it's possible that AI could be both increasing demand and decreasing demand at the same time in different ways. And we've got some anecdotal evidence we can point to. But basically, we can see some evidence that some of the tasks, those kind of entry-level tasks that once upon a time may have been completed by entry-level job seekers, are now being done by AI. But at the same time, the existence of AI as a tool has de-risked certain elements of entry-level work. So that could potentially increase the demand there, or make it easier to onboard people into jobs than perhaps it once was. So there's potentially momentum in both directions, and so the evidence is still a bit mixed, and we need to keep a close eye on it. But Hannah, you're going to take us through some of the detail around this.
Okay, so this chart shows a trend in numbers of job postings requesting AI skills compared to all other job postings. So AI is the orange line. So job postings requesting AI skills were minimal before 2016, but then increased sharply over the following 6 years. They then fell a bit in line with the rest of the labour market, but have increased sharply over the following year to a record high. So in the 6 months to October 2025, job postings requesting AI skills were 133% higher than a year ago, compared to a 1% fall for all other job postings. And they were 186% higher than the long-term average, compared to a 11% fall across all other job postings. Okay, sorry, this chart shows the results of Cambridgeshire Chamber's last quarterly economic survey, where businesses were asked to what extent the adoption of AI technologies was likely to influence their recruitment plans for entry-level roles over the next 12 months. So 2/3 mentioned that there'd be no impact, so 27% said this wasn't applicable to their business, and 40% said it wouldn't change their recruitment plans. However, of those who did note an impact, AI was just as likely to increase demand as it was to reduce demand. So 10% said AI technologies would increase recruitment plans, so 4% significantly, 6% slightly, and 9% said AI technologies would reduce recruitment plans, so 3% significantly and 6% slightly. We're still looking for more data on this, so this has remained as a question in the latest quarterly economic survey, which is currently live until the 8th of December. So please do go to the Chamber's website or social media for the link if you'd like to participate this quarter.
Thanks, Hannah. So moving towards the kind of back end of the presentation now, and green skills and occupations. So again, a story of gathering momentum, really. So the momentum in green job hiring remains strong and essentially unchanged in its positive trajectory. So in the previous report, we noted that green postings were up by well over 1/3 over the previous 6 months, and the latest figure is just under 1/3. So over a comparable period, it's a similar magnitude of growth, and that reinforces that the demand for green skills is consistently outpacing the overall jobs market. Within this, some skills like retrofitting are increasingly sought after. We'll come on to that in a minute. And of note is that green hiring is broad-based, both geographically across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, but also by sector. We see a range of green jobs across all different parts of the economy. And that's something actually that we saw heavily reflected in the research that we did around agri-tech, agri-food. It's a lot of different sectors and types of businesses higher across this agenda. So if I just move us on to, I think, Hannah, you were going to give us some detail on this slide.
Yep, so this chart shows the trend in numbers of job postings requesting green skills, that's the orange line, compared to all other job postings. So green job postings have increased since late 2020 and increased strongly in the 6 months to October 2025. So a 32% increase compared to a much weaker 6% increase across all other job postings. And green job postings are also 62% higher than long-term average levels, while other postings are 11% below average. So the biggest recruiter over the last 6 months was Anglian Water, which coincides with skills relating to wastewater being most in demand, followed by skills relating to waste management and environment, health and safety. And if we look at 5-year averages, most skills accounted for larger shares of all job postings over the past 6 months, particularly skills relating to wastewater, retrofitting and environment, health and safety.
Thanks. And I should say within the report and also within this slide deck, there are additional details of hiring by geography and also about the top recruiters across this area of the economy. So do check out the greater detail that there is in the report if this is of interest to you. And so finishing off transferable skills. So since our last report, our understanding of skills demand hasn't changed all that much, but what we can see is that the top 10 skills requested within job ads are all transferable. In the previous report, I think it was 9 out of 10 rather than 10 out of 10, but the long-term story has been that transferable skills continue to dominate the skills requested within job ads. So nothing has displaced transferable skills at the top of employer skills requirements, and as ever, communication, teamwork, and some others continue to be critical and very common denominators in job postings. So I'm just going to skip through this just because not a lot has changed. But Hannah, you're going to just give us a quick rundown of this slide.
Yep. So yeah, again, very little change to report on transferable skills from quarter to quarter. They continue to be the most in-demand skills across job postings because they are relevant to a whole range of available jobs. So the top 10 skills requested over the past 5 years have all been transferable skills, with communication being the most in-demand skill, followed by management, customer service being detail-orientated, sales, planning, leadership, research, problem solving, and operations.
Thanks, Hannah. And then just finishing off at the end of these, regulars to these workshops will know that we always like to post kind of research questions that are kind of uppermost in our minds, or what the research has thrown up as issues that we want to deal with in a bit more depth. So it'd be good to share these with you and also get your feedback on them if you've got some thoughts. So we've put 7 on the slide there. So we continue to be interested, of course, in changes to recruitment activity and skills demand across the priority sectors for economic development strategies within this region, which are captured, which are essentially the priority sectors within the local growth plan. We're really interested in how the demand for digital skills is evolving, and recent advances in AI and some other things, and how digital adoption affects demand for entry-level roles. So we're continuing, as Hannah says, to track that within the quarterly economic survey, and also to pick up kind of more anecdotal evidence from employers about how entry-level roles and AI adoption influence each other, because that's a really sort of key thing we want to understand at the moment. We want to understand the relationship between the declining shares of the region's employers who provide on-the-job and off-the-job training, against the rising popularity of online e-learning. So we've got a lot of evidence that there's a kind of boom in demand and interest for online forms of learning, but that sits alongside some declining metrics for employer investment in training. So one of the things that that interests us is whether or not we're capturing the full extent of employer training adequately within the data that we have, official data and those that we collect. So we definitely want to try and improve how we do that, so that we're capturing the full scope of activity that employers undertake. We continue to be interested in synthesizing lessons around workplace placement strategies for T-levels and other qualifications. We definitely want to deepen our understanding of spatial disparities given the data that we've just presented in this workshop. And of course, we want to deepen our understanding of economic inactivity and trying to account for the impact of new policies and programs that are directed at that challenge in the labour markets. We want to kind of keep a tab on that and understand how well those are working. And then finally, we want to gain an accurate picture of economic inactivity in some of the labour force survey metrics where we have concerns about the quality of the data. So we kind of skipped over it in this presentation, but some of the numbers that we're seeing at a local level that come through official surveys, such as those that the Office for National Statistics provide, don't look all that credible to us because of the small numbers included in their survey samples. So that does make it difficult to be confident about some of the numbers that we're seeing when you're seeing really low sample sizes. There's not a lot we can do about that other than to look at the metrics in the round. So, with this quarterly report that we put together, we never put too much focus on one set of data. We try to build up a picture from a range of data sources, and we'll continue to do that for economic inactivity as for other areas. So that's that's me, Nick. If you wanted to go into Q&A, or if we go to Andrea's presentation.
Yeah, we'll switch straight over to Andrea's presentation, then we'll do a collective Q&A at the end. So I'll hand over to Andrea from the CPCA.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm just going to try and share my slides. So hopefully this will work. Okay, is that sharing okay with everybody?
Yep, that's perfect.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, fabulous. So good morning, everybody. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Andrea Wood, Assistant Director for Skills and Employment at the Combined Authority. This morning, I'm just going to talk to you briefly about our local growth plan, our local Get Britain Working plan, and how this links to the local skills improvement plan, and what some of our key priorities and deliverables are going to be over the coming 12 to 24 months in terms of the implementation of those plans. So this infographic just helpfully summarises that across the region we have adopted a local growth plan using a guiding star approach, meaning that all subsequent strategies and plans must align to our local growth plan. And our local growth plan contains a list of shared priorities with government. It's aligned with the National Industrial Strategy, and it sets out the projected growth that we expect to see across the next 10 years within our region. And it also has a lot to do with the region having established mayoral status, which will lead to an integrated funding settlement across the region, which hopefully should see more investment into some of the key sort of strategies and plans and activities that we need to really enable growth across our place. So our plan was agreed by the Combined Authority Board on the 22nd of October. It's due to be fully published on the 10th of December, so we will be able to share those that plan with you through the Chamber and through this partnership. It sets out our kind of place challenges, around skills and employment, but also our infrastructure challenges around energy, water, transport, etc. And the plan mentions the key kind of underpinning things that we need to address if we are to achieve growth across the region. In the plan, we have a mayoral target to triple the size of the economy. So the normal core target is doubling the size of the economy, but we have a mayoral target in there of tripling the size of the economy. So to do that, we really needed to look and identify what are the key priority sectors. And I know those of you that have been attending these calls previously will be not surprised by the priority sectors that you see in front of you. But these 6 priority sectors have been identified as the real engines of economic growth across our region, demonstrating the most potential to triple the economy by 2050. They're obviously anchored within key areas of strength and really designed to attract investment and to embed the frontier industries that really sit alongside them and can contribute towards significant growth. But the priority sectors are not just what we're focused on. We also want to be focused on our everyday economy, recognising that not only does the region excel in having world-class clusters for research institutions and frontier enterprises, but we also recognise the foundation economy is equally vital, and that includes a lot of the sectors that Mike and Hannah have spoken to us about this morning, including our healthcare sector, our teaching and education sector, and also the likes of transport, logistics. So really looking at that and not looking at the priority sectors in isolation is very important. The growth plan also looks at the impacts on growth and what we expect to see if we double and triple our sort of levels of GVA across the region by 2050. And it does an assessment on looking at what we expect to see in terms of growth in employment, population, skills levels, but also what we're going to need in terms of water, energy, housing, and starts to touch on things like social infrastructure, healthcare facilities, educational provision, etc. So it's looking at things in the round in terms of what we're going to need to be able to deliver the growth projections. The growth plan will have within it a number of priority sector plans. It will also talk about opportunity zones and action areas, which I'll talk to you about really briefly next. And it also has a list of shared infrastructure priorities across the region. In terms of our opportunity zones, these 4 zones have been identified within the growth plan. And you'll see that they are areas where there are a number of key developments happening in those areas where we expect the growth to spill out across the region and actually benefit not only the areas of opportunity that exist there, but wider areas across the region, because really recognising and the areas of deprivation being a key kind of fact that typically Cambridge has been the centre of the universe in terms of a lot of growth, but there are multiple other areas across the region where we are going to be seeing major investment, and we want there to be inclusive growth across the region so that multiple areas can also benefit from jobs and that inclusive growth, as I've mentioned. Our action areas are our areas where we expect there to be a strong economy sort of within reach, and we want those areas to really benefit from that growth. So our action areas are areas where we will look at really tackling some of the inequalities around education and skills levels and employment, but also looking at spatial disparities and unlocking community potential. So there'll be a lot of work that will be led by the authority in that space to look at how we can embed skills, employment and deprivation challenges into the growth plan. Now, how are we going to do a lot of that and really thread a lot of what we've been talking about this morning into that growth plan? You'll see there, again, a reminder of the infographic, how A key priority for us is around skills, health and employment, and the Get Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Working Plan and the Local Skills Improvement Plan and how that feeds in. And the Local Skills Improvement Plan is an integral part of the overarching Get Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Working Plan, which is really our strategic employment and skills plan. So moving forward, this will be a crucial document to really reference when looking at wider developments across the region. So the Get Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Working Plan it is a strategic partnership between the CPCA, who's leading it, but in partnership with Job Centre Plus and the Department for Work and Pensions, and also the NHS and Integrated Care Services. And the plan intends to develop a whole system approach to tackling the supply and demand side challenges within our local labour market, whilst making progress towards an 80% employment rate. So it's heartening to hear that we're making really good progress towards that, but we do have significant regional disparities in that employment rate, and that's one of the key challenges that we have in our area that we need to tackle. In line with the scope of the Get Britain White Paper, Get Britain Working White Paper, it's designed to address labour market issues related to participation, progression and job quality. So as Mike has mentioned this morning, we're doing a lot more work looking at economic inactivity, especially due to ill health, and what we can do to really address some of those key challenges. But the plan will also bring together stakeholders to ensure a unified understanding of local challenges and a really good understanding of what services and organisations are currently doing to address some of these key challenges. And the Get Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Working Plan was approved at board last week. It will be officially published after Christmas, so we'll share that with you so that you can see the details of the analysis and what's in the plan. The Local Skills Improvement Plan, we're familiar with it. We're just going to obviously be going into round 2, and it will specifically focus on the kind of local skills needs to improve our skills offer, to really start to boost economic growth further and work towards that target of tripling GVA across the region, and also to mobilise employers and partners to co-create solutions around the skills needs that we have locally. So hopefully you can see how the LSIP and the Get Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Working Plan are integral to each other in terms of driving forward the key challenges that we have regionally around skills. So in terms of the priorities and deliverables within the Get Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Working Plan, the key one is around providing systems leadership across the work, health and skills system to really develop an integrated system approach, really bringing together stakeholders to get that unified understanding and have a good understanding of what's on offer locally so that we can plug those gaps. The key target there around tackling hidden unemployment and ill health related economic inactivity. So how will we do that? Well, we will continue to support the delivery of work well across the region, and we will roll out the delivery of our Connect to Work programme, which is a fully funded £15 million programme over the next 4.5 years that's specifically going to be targeted at supporting economically inactive adults to stay in work or to get into work with employment support programmes provided. We will also extend our all-age careers service, working with Job Centre Plus and the National Careers Service, making sure that's well integrated within local services. And we will continue to offer programmes like our paid internship programmes and employer incentives to really support employers locally to recruit and to fill some of their hard-to-fill vacancies. Working really closely with Job Centre Plus, we'll work with them to really revise the offer of support that's provided through job centres locally, where we see them shift their focus to working more proactively with voluntary customers in the limited capacity for work and work-related activity cohorts, whilst focusing on supporting those 50+, those with work, health and disability challenges, and also supporting people with in-work progression, which is a real key to driving growth within our economy, supporting people to upskill, reskill, and take opportunities ahead of them through career development. We'll be working really closely with the NHS and the Integrated Care Board and Care Services to enable them to deliver the National Neighbourhood Health Implementation Programme, which is a key programme listed within the NHS 10-year plan. In particular, that will be delivered across Peterborough and Fenland, and that will be about developing neighbourhood health services, where skills and employment will always be part of the offer of support for people accessing health services in that space. We aim to really tackle the NEET rate amongst young people through working more closely with our statutory bodies such as Cambridgeshire County Council and Peterborough City Council, really strengthening the accountability and partnership between ourselves and enhancing the offer of support for 16 and 17-year-olds who are NEET through the Youth Guarantee. And obviously continuing to deliver the Youth Guarantee Trailblazer into year 2 and beyond is a key priority for us, as well as delivering our regional careers hub and looking to establish a youth employment hub in Cambridgeshire, just as we've recently established in Peterborough at Peterborough United. Other key priorities in there are around supporting employers to invest in skills and development through incentives, and supporting employers to access schemes that promote the uptake of disability confident, for example, and enabling employers to receive the support they need to employ talent locally. We'll tackle labour and skills shortages that are holding back economic growth by focusing in on our priority but foundational economies as well. And we'll do that through the devolved Adult Skills Fund and our consolidated funding of skills bootcamps and free courses for jobs that will be focused on in the year ahead. But also the local skills improvement plan is a key part of tackling those skills shortages and the analysis that goes along with that and the subsequent action plan that's attached. For us, we know we want to really try and close the level 3 attainment gap and also the HE access gap. It's obviously heartening to see that Peterborough is doing so well in terms of the number of people progressing to HE, but we also want to monitor not only those going to university, but those who are perhaps moving on to taking on higher level apprenticeships. So really focusing in on apprenticeship growth and employer investment in skills by supporting employers to understand the changes to the apprenticeship levy as it moves towards the growth and skills levy within the next few months. And finally, the last two things there that we're focused on are looking at addressing some of the skills infrastructure challenges that we have within our skills system, ensuring that our FE colleges, training providers and universities have got the right assets and estates to be able to deliver the skills provision that we need into the future, and reviewing transport policies to make sure that young people and adults have got adequate and accessible links to public transport that will enable them to progress to learning and work. So some key activities there. In terms of our outcomes, really focused on progressing towards the 80% employment rate, which is the national target that's been set by government, looking at reducing our health-related economic inactivity, and as Mike said, really drilling down locally into that place-based data to get that accurate picture of what things look like on the ground. Reducing the employment rate gap between disabled people and non-disabled people is a key priority for the government and for us within our local plan, as is reducing NEET, increasing the employment rate of women, reducing the local variation of employment rates across the region, and strengthening an integrated approach between work, health and skills delivered in partnership with others. So in terms of next steps and delivery planning, the growth plan will be published with a series of partnership roadshows that will be going on into the new year to really raise awareness of what that plan is. As I've mentioned, the Get Cambridgeshire and Peterborough working plan will be published in full after Christmas, and the local skills improvement plan timeline will be that will be published in full in June of next year, but obviously a significant amount of work is going on that you'll be involved in between now and then to get that plan published and then integrated and aligned with that local growth plan. So hopefully that's given everybody a bit of a strategic view of where we're at from a growth plan, from a skills and employment plan perspective, and what some of our kind of key priorities are in that space. And I'm happy to take any questions. I'll stop sharing now. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. We're now going to move into a general Q&A. So you can target your questions at either Andrea, Mike, or Hannah. We can take them in the chat if you want to put your questions in the chat, or if you raise your hand, you're also more than welcome to ask your question in that way. So I'll give people a couple of minutes just to think about questions they may have, and then we can move into the Q&A. Well, I will go ahead and I'll warm everyone up, shall I? Mike, Hannah, the report that you've just kind of outlined, I would say, given that I've been to all of these quarterly reports over, say, the last year and a half or so, it seems to be probably the most overwhelmingly positive one. In comparison to previous quarters, there are obviously still lots of negative kind of statistics in there, especially around the kind of pockets of deprivation we have in the region. But there were some really positive takeaways. Do you have any idea why that might be?
Anna, do you want to kick off, and then I think, I mean, just before, I mean, I think it's perhaps worth saying that although we didn't cover it in the workshop, if you look at the national picture too, I mean, there's been the media have focused, I think, a bit on the increase in the unemployment rate across the country, but underneath that, there has been some decline in economic inactivity and increase in participation, which has been gone alongside that. So I think it's worth perhaps pointing that out at national picture as well. So there is a national context to these figures. But Hannah, if you wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the main developments over the last year has been this fall in economic inactivity, and I guess we're moving further away from the pandemic, so this could be a natural kind of improvement in ill health over time, and also there's been a lot of targeted interventions to help people who have suffering from ill health and ill health related inactivity over the past year. So potentially those are starting to feed through into labour market outcomes now as well.
Brilliant, thank you. And I assume that the statistics around an increase in high level education in Peterborough, the 23-24 stats, may be directly linked to the kind of ARU Peterborough kind of project really kind of setting into the city, if it would be too bold of me to say so. Okay, we have a question from Tariq for you, Andrea. Can you say a bit more about plans to increase apprenticeship opportunities for school and college leavers?
Yeah, sure. So we're quite bothered by the fact that we are seeing a decline in young people in particular taking up apprenticeships post 16. And we've welcomed some of the changes that the government have introduced to encourage and incentivise employers to take young people into apprenticeships across the country. But we know and we recognise that we need to do more in our region to really stimulate that uptake. So we're doing it in a number of ways. At the kind of most important point is around careers advice and guidance, and working with schools through the Careers Hub to make sure that schools are aware of local apprenticeship opportunities and that employers are encouraged and supported to provide work inspiration activities and careers and work experience, etc., to young people. But for employers, we've also introduced a number of financial incentives that will support growth in apprenticeships. So through the Youth Guarantee, for example, we're providing employers with an apprenticeship grant of up to £2,000 for specific places across the region if they're taking on a young person into an apprenticeship. And we also have a paid internship scheme, which is a really good way for employers to recruit somebody and to really test whether that relationship is going to work across the first initial kind of 6 to 12 weeks of an internship, and hopefully then convert that into an apprenticeship. And as we hear more from the government around the growth and skills levy and how that's going to change, we want to work with the Chamber and with other employers to obviously support them to understand what that means, and to continue where possible to help administer some of the sharing schemes that are available. So one of the other things we do in the skills team is we administer an apprenticeship levy share scheme so that SMEs can access apprenticeship levy funding to really support the growth of apprenticeships across the region as well. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Andrea. Mike, Hannah, a question for you, probably more around the specifics of data. Is there an opportunity to get more detailed data about employment within the creative industries in the region and localities?
I was going to say yes, specifically around. So one of the things we can do is look at activity within the job market. So we can look at jobs ads and things like that, which give us a really rich seam of data once we've defined the scope of it. But Hannah, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I mean, something we could get data on if you'd like it. Yeah, if you just give us a few days, we can send something over. I don't know if you want just kind of percentages of employment or trends in changes in employment over time, but I mean, we can do both of those.
Brilliant. I think if you reach out to the Chamber, Louise, we can link you up with Mike and Hannah, and they will be able to assist with that. We have a question from Cliff. Qualification and course funding for 16 to 19 and adults reskilling and upskilling and new entrants into renewables and green skills is proving to be a barrier for many colleges, adding them to the curriculum. Is this something that will be taken into consideration in the foreseeable future?
You want me to take that one?
Yes, sure.
So unfortunately, 16 to 19 funding is something we have little influence over because that's directly given to the colleges from the Department for Education. But through Skills England and local skills improvement plans, I think the Department for Education certainly recognise the need for further provision to be available for young people in that green skills and renewables space. In terms of adults, that is something we have a devolved budget on, and we've very much focused a lot of our adult skills funding, and in particular skills bootcamp funding, on green skills and renewables. And we've got a number of skills bootcamps that are being delivered across the region in that sector, which is providing additional capacity for colleges to actually deliver that provision. So I would argue that it is something we probably are already addressing, and we've also supported through local growth funds with things like additional skills capital into green tech sort of facilities at both Cambridge Regional College and Peterborough, the Inspire Education Group college in Peterborough. So something that we have been doing, and something that we'll obviously continue to keep an eye on.
I should say, just Andrea, just to follow up on your point there. So one of as part of the agri-tech, agri-food research that we did a sort of quite a detailed mapping of kind of technical education requirements to that sector, and obviously there's quite a big overlap with some of the green skills that we've talked about. So we've tried to map out in detail where there are gaps in provision specifically relating to agri-tech and agri-food. But when you I mean, we touched on that very briefly in the workshop, but the report has a bit more detail on it. But just to sort of reassure you that there are quite sort of detailed analytical exercises to sort of understand both the scope of some of those education and qualification barriers to green jobs, and also the quantum of demand as well.
Brilliant. Thanks, Mike. We have two more questions in the chat, so we'll take these two questions and then I will wrap up the session. So, first question is from Thomas, and it's for you, Hannah. Hannah, I see increases in AI related skills at their highest being in information and communication and financial service roles in 2025, which resonates with what you have presented. Have you conducted any tracking of these roles? Is it possible they are AI model slash machine training roles which are necessary in the short term but not sustainable in the long term?
Yeah, that's an interesting point, and it's something we can look at. We haven't done so far, but the job postings information that we have, we can see what kind of roles are requesting AI skills, and perhaps we'll include that in our next report.
Brilliant, thank you. And we have a question from Richard. With FCA fines for non-compliance rising year on year, it is increasingly important for Cambridgeshire Council to clearly define and communicate the specific areas of regulatory compliance in which it will support local businesses. Please let me know your thoughts. Possibly one for you, Andrea.
By default, because I'm linked to local government. I really am not briefed enough on that to have an opinion, I'm afraid. So it's not something that that I really have a thought on. But I can certainly take that away and speak to our place and connectivity teams who are obviously linked to the county council on that front.
Brilliant. And if you haven't had time to ask a question today, or maybe you think of one post the session and you really want to ask it, you can reach out to anyone in the Chamber team if you already have a contact. And if you don't, you can reach out to lsip@cambridgeshire.chamber.co.uk. But I'm just going to bring the session to a close. Thank you so much, everyone attending. Thank you very much to Mike and Hannah for your report. And thank you, Andrea, for updating us from the Combined Authority perspective. I just want to raise that we have work experience and kind of bringing young people into workplace has been referenced in this session. And we have a webinar on the 9th of December with the Combined Authority Skills team talking about the future of modern work experience. For those of you who weren't able to attend our session a couple of weeks ago at the Marriott Hotel in Huntingdon, the Careers and Enterprise Company are really kind of rethinking what work experience looks like. For many of us, traditionally, it's that 1 week in year 10 where you kind of maybe you're lucky enough to know someone whose mum works in a business and you can go work with them, or you just get pigeonholed into a business of some description. So you do your work experience, but they're rethinking how that works, the structures, the ages, whether you need to go for a whole week or you can go for a day. So come along to that session. We'll follow up with a link to register for that afterwards, but definitely worthwhile attending. But that brings us to a close. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming, and please do forward any questions to us.